Klum, shalom. Just told me recording in progress. So good evening, everyone. We are now standing at the 10-day point before Pesach, which is a slippery slope to say the least. Next week, there will not be a shiur. The week following through Chol Hamoed will not be a shiur. Depending if I have enough time the week following, there will or will not be a shiur. So we're not going to see each other for a couple of weeks. Let me wish you a Chag Kosher V'Sameach.
He's coming. He's coming upstairs.
See you the
Marvin's on his way, so I'll wait a second for
It
him.
may take him 3 minutes.
He's going from downstairs to upstairs. It's always an ascension. So I will ask a question. I'll ask it again when Marvin joins us. Everybody here, when maybe they were in the 5th grade and the teacher started talking about how to read a news article, they said a news article should answer 5 questions, and they all begin with W. This is the class participation point for tonight. What are the 5 W's?
Who, when, where,
who, how.
What?
That's an H.
How is an H, Richard? That was good of you.
I
Okay.
corrected myself.
Who? Yeah, what else?
when,
Yeah, what?
when,
When? Good,
Where?
right?
Why?
yeah, I like that one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You guys got it. When Marvin comes on, I'll say it again. You know, every time we approach a shiur, I want to find out, especially in a non-linear Navi. Non-linear, I mean, we're not going through the course of history from day 1 to day 1000. We are talking about various episodes. Some of them fall in sequence. Add to it ein mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah. There is no before or after. There's no timeline. It makes it difficult. So I like to know, what is this parak doing here? So that is not the what, the what, but that's my why. Why does this parak come now? And if anyone has looked at the first pasuk, we have the word kina. Kina is a word that you all will recognize because we say kinos on Tisha B'Av. Kinos are translated as
Lamentations.
Lamentations. And you know something? I saw a beautiful Connecticut in Marvin. I'll wait till he gets on and we'll just give a brief recap of what it was. Okay, Marvin is joining us. Hi, Marvin. Tell me when you can hear. Do you hear us? And Bruce is here too. Baruch Hashem. Okay, let's see. Marvin, do you hear us? Marvin, I see you can be heard. Okay.
I apologize. I was running late.
Okay, it's not a problem. Bruce, you're here, and Bruce wants to make an announcement. We're learning Le'ilui Nishmas.
Dustin Ben Yosef.
Nassim Ben Yosef, who's his father-in-law, I met, was a lovely gentleman.
I remember.
We're also learning for Refuah Shlema for Dvor Rezel Bat Chaya Sardina, my mother-in-law, who's having a rough time with things right now. She should have Refuah Shlema as well. Okay, I'm going to go back. We are, Amen is right. We're going back now to get back to where we once belonged. Perek Yud Tes. I started to say to Marvin, I'll repeat it for Marvin and to Bruce and to Richard. I think we said it, no. When we were in the 5th grade, there was a thing about teaching you how to construct, how to look for, how to read a news article. And they said it has to answer 5 questions. 5 questions, all beginning with the letter W. It was audience participation before you came on, so now I'll just recoup. It's who, what, where, why, and when. So like I said, we're dealing with a non-linear Navi. It's not a timeline from point A to point Z. It's not. It's all over the place. It takes place in different locations. It takes place in prophetic dreams. So my first question is always, my first number 1 is why? why does this parak come now? And now we'll all be caught up and say, and why are we using the term kina, which a few of you said means lamentations? That's what we call the book of Eicha, is called the book of lamentations. Eicha written by Yirmiyah, ripped up by the wicked king and burned in the fire with Shem HaMeforosh, and later rewritten again by his scribe. But I saw a beautiful term for it in Rav Moshe Eisman's Sefer, elegy. I said, wow, that is a stunning, stunning term. So, question number one, why are we doing this parak here? Why? Two, why are we employing the term kina, which appears in the beginning and the end of the parak? Kina, lamentation, dirge, to put it in musical terms, elegy. Well, why are we doing it? So, just to give the simplest of answers, the Abarbanel says that Biavur Shenibei Hanavi al Bapalat Tzidkiyahu, because we have dealt with the downfall of Tzidkiyahu, he says, Tzivahu Ata, God has commanded the Navi now, Sheyisa Kina, raise a dirge, a lamentation, an elegy, a love. It's basically, it's almost like a hesped, but it's not. It's a dirge. It's a sad song. Tells you about some sad events. Kol echav b'nei Yoshiyahu mishpachto. Why is it sad? Well, we'll tell you why it's sad very shortly. And Tova Ganzel, in her fantastic book, says that on page 97, in case you're looking, she said, we have examined the central elements of the criticism leveled against Tzidkiah. By the way, that was in Perek Yud Zayin. We talked about the fact that he was Mephir Bris. He couldn't keep his covenant with the king, with Nebuchadnezzar, and he got punished because that's a bad representation of Klal Yisrael, plus other things. And now, in order to round off Yechezkel's prophecies on the subject, we're going to do a lamentation, a kina, in this chapter. And the symbolic act described in the second part of chapter 21, which we'll get to in a couple of weeks. Our focus thus far has been Yechezkel's description of the decline of the institution of the Israelite monarchy. Now, another element is introduced to explain the parable in chapter 17, which depicts historical processes such as the coronation of a man of royal ancestry, the obligation of the king of Judah to be loyal to the king of Babylonia, and on and on and on. So the prophecy of this chapter, Yud Tes, shares stylistic thematic links with the prophecy about Tzidkiah's fate. It returns to the previous generation, the days of Yehoachaz and Yehoiakim. The lamentations seem to have been uttered after the events it describes. In other words, they happened, says she, and he is telling them after they have happened. So it complements the prophetic perspective that relates to Jerusalem's fate being sealed. And he says, in the first pasuk, says, Ba'ata, you, saw kina, really means raise or carry a dirge al Nisi'ei Yisrael, which leads to another question. Nisi'ei Yisrael, Nisiim? Who, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Who are we talking about? He says Nisiim means kings. Okay, she says that as well. Now, the term kina is used more often in Yechezkel than any prophet throughout the canon of Nach. And I can tell you exactly. It is mentioned in here, it's mentioned once in Perek Beis.
Which word did you say? Which
One more
word?
time.
Which word?
Kina.
Okay.
Kina. It's
I
mentioned
apologize.
once in Perek Beis, no problem. It's mentioned and Perek Chaf Vav once, Chaf Zayin twice, Chaf Ches another one more time, and in Perek Lamed Bet twice more. That's 8 times. The rest of the canon of Nach mentions a total of 7 times. So he's got the lock on Lamentations. So why are we using, we're still in the first pasuk, why are we using the term Nasi? And remember, we got to try and answer 5 questions here. Why are we using the term Nasi? Because it usually means a ruler or a governor. In most instances, it refers to the head of a tribe or a regional leader. But in some places, Nasi is used in the monarchical sense, the monarchy, the king. Now, here, this is a kina for the final kings of Judah, referring to them as Nesi'ei Yisrael. That's in Pasuk Aleph. Okay, great. So my first question is why, and it seems to be, fairly well answered. My next question in my order is, what is the symbolism about? What are the misholim? What are the parallels we're dealing with? And here clearly, we're dealing with 2 different misholim. We're talking about the mashal of a pride of lions, a mother lion, and her progeny at different ages. And she's referred to as Aim, what a mother you are, meaning either what a great mother you are, or maybe not so much, maybe you missed the boat, depending on the forest we're going to consult. The second is we're talking about a grapevine. Now, we've used the grapevine metaphor before. We used the grapevine, we said a grapevine is useful if it doesn't produce good fruit, for kindling, for nothing more. It's not worth anything. And oddly enough, the term aim, mother, is used in the grapevine metaphor. The first psukim Beis through Tes, are the lion. Psukim Yud through Yud Daled are the Geffen, the grapevine. Okay, that breaks it up. And before I go into who does what about what, which is really what the real confusion of the parak is, I told David I've spent at least 13 hours on this parak, and it's 14 psukim, which means I'm very dense, probably, or it's very dense, so maybe a combination of both. So what is the symbolism about? What is the storyline? Now, Tova Ganzel says about the symbolism, she says, the first, the royal family of Judah is compared to a family of lions, and the second, to a vine. Now, you're going to say it appears that these parallels, along with the connection between them, extends far back in history. And the truth is it does. It goes back when the journey of the tribe of Judah began in Yaakov's blessings to his son. Rather than reading them to you in English, since I have the very fine Tanakh, I can read it and translate it. It comes from Bereshis Perek Mem Tes, Psukim Chet through Yud Beis. Yehuda Ata Yoducha Achecha. He says, your brothers will praise you. Be'oref Oivecha. Says, your hands will be on the necks of your foes. Ishtachavu lecha b'nei avicha. And to you, your father's sons bow. First pasuk. Then he says, Gur Aryeh Yehuda, a lion's cub. Gur Aryeh, lion cub. Miteref b'nei Alisa, says, from the prey, my son, you have risen from the prey. It says, Korah Ravatska Aryeh, and he said, she crouches, lies down like a lavi, a lioness, not a lion, but a lioness. He says, Ukilavi, he says, Mi Yikimenu, and who dares to rouse him? This is a mixed metaphor of Aryeh and Lavi. Aryeh is male, Lavi is female. I'm not going to start to touch up what happened in Bereshis. When we finish Nach, we'll go back to the Tuh in Tanakh, and maybe we'll see. And then it says, Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda. And he says, the scepter of monarchy, will not pass from Yehuda. He says, Umechokek mi bein raglav, nor the staff from between his feet. These are all symbols of ruling and royalty, monarchy. It says, Ad ki yavo shila delo yikachas amim, so that the tribute will come to him and the homage of nations be his. Osri lagefen iro ulasreka b'ni asono. He tethers his donkey to vines. And he says, ki base by yayin levusho. He says he washes his clothes in wine. Bidam anavim suso. He says, and his robe in the blood of grapes, which is wine. Pesach coming upon us. And finally, the last pasuk in the bracha is Hachlili einayim miyayin. It says his eyes are darker than wine. Uleven shinayim mechalav, and his teeth whiter than milk. So we have the rulership analogy brought down way back in Bereshis, having to do with Yehuda, and here we're talking about Malchus Yehuda and the end of Malchus Yehuda. So it fits very, very well. Now, I'm just going to read you just a couple of lines. Rabbi Moshe Eisman's book is miraculous. It's amazing. It says, Yechezkel is to sing a kinah, a dirge for the princes of Israel. In quick succession, the reigns of Yoshiyahu's 2 sons and grandson had ended in disaster as they languished in exile or died a cruel death. Yehoachaz and Yehoiakim had been dragged to Egypt and Babylon, respectively. Yehoiakim's body has been torn limb by limb by the Babylonians. It says, and that's in Vayikra Rabbah. If you want to hear the account of it and why it happened, I happen to have it from Vayikra Rabbah at Otzar Midrashim. Anybody wants to hear it, you let me know, or I'll send you a picture of it. In a few short years, Tzidkiyahu was to be ignominiously captured, and the final agony of the land would be ended. And so Yechezkel is to mourn Yoshiyahu's royal house. That's what we're doing here. We talked about what he did wrong, and now we're going to mourn him. We had Yirmiyahu Konen Yoshiyahu, which is a very famous kinah that we do on Tisha B'Av. And it also happens to be in Yirmiyahu. So mourning is in order. So what I wanted to do now is go through the psukim, Aleph through Tes, with a little bit of commentary on them. Then I have a chart which I can summarize for you, which talks about the events that are symbolized by the lioness, her young cubs, her older, youthful cubs, and the events in history. I've got a nice chart that really explains it all through where it happens in Nach. But first, let's read some psukim and see what we get. So it says, V'yamarta ma imcha levia bein arayos. Ma imcha. What does that mean? What is your mother? Or if you take a look at the way it can be translated, he says, alas, your mother was a lioness. Alas seems to indicate this was not such a good thing. There are other Mefarshim who say, what a mother she was. Let's follow the pasuk through. Ma imcha levia, a lioness, bein arayos, among lions, robotza. She crouches down with lions, which means this is a fearless female mother of the pride. Betoch kfirim ribsa gureha. Betoch kfirim ravsa fireha. What does that mean? So if you want to know what all these things mean, I took a look in the Malbim, and the Malbim gives you an explanation. The Malbim in your Mikros Gedolos is on page 281. It's the right-hand column, Biur Ha'inyan, Pasuk Beis, about halfway down. And it says, Amar imach es nidnes leleviyah. She's compared to a lioness. Rav Tzabein Arayos, the ribsa esku reha ketanim betoch firim. Crouches among lions, and she grows her young among those who are older than her young. So he says, Yesh Havdel ben Gur Kfir v'Aryeh. These are three different names. If we were Eskimos, we would know 100 different names for snow. So here we have three different names, four different names. We have Levia, which is a lioness. He says, Gur. What is a Gur? Ari Hayonek. It's a nursing lion. V'yoz eno torefadayim. It's no longer it's not yet a predator. Uke'es yigdal, when it grows up, yikra b'shem, fear. It gets a little bit older. Chu aryeh hatsa ir liyamim. It is a young lion, no longer a nursing whelp, but a young lion. V'oz yitrof bim onaso, and then it will be a predator and seek its prey. Aval lo yisrachek misuko al hateref, but it doesn't go far from its home, its nest, its dominion. Because she yagil yoser, when it grows more, called an aryeh. Then the aryeh travels wherever it wants to, seeks prey wherever it wants to seek prey. So he says, "V'siper shahalavia hazos." This lioness, Ravtza ben Arayos v'Gureha. She's crouching among grown lions, and her youngest, Aktanim, Ribsa ben Kfirim, with slightly older lions. Shehem Gedolim min HaGurim. The gur is the smallest. Those are hers, and then they're Kfirim, or a little bit older. Zem Mashal al Yoshia. Shahaya Melech Kibor Ka'aryeh. He says Yoshia was a king as strong as a lion. The Ravat Bain Yeser Hamlachim. And he would, they say if you lie down with dogs, you get fleas, but if you lie down with kings, you become royal. And he would make himself at home among the kings of the nations. Ubanav Ktanim Nechshavu Bain Hamlachim Adirim. Therefore, his children were considered royal, because that's the way that they were brought up. Goes weiter. Vata'al echad migureha. Gimel, echad migureha. Vata'al. Ta'al means she elevated one of her youngest lion cubs. We can call them whelps. And Rashi says, Vata'al echad migureha. He says this is talking about al b'nei Yoshiyahu ne'emra kinazu. Rashi says this is talking about the sons of Yoshiyahu. He says Harishon was the first son, Yehoachaz. Because what are we looking at? We're looking at a progression of this mother lion progressively trying to put her children, we say have grown up as royalty, to take their place as kings, and the various fates they meet. That's what we're talking about. You go to Pasuk Daled, it says, "Vayishma'u elav goyim b'sachtam nitfas." He says, and they listened to him, but he was caught in their trap. I believe when I read sachtam means it's like you dig a big hole and you cover it up with grass, and the animal falls into it. He says, "Vayavi'uhu b'chayim el eretz Mitzrayim," and he was brought alive to the land of Mitzrayim. Now, on these psukim, Rabbi Eliezer, the Balgancé says on page 280, left-hand column underneath Rashi. He has a different take on this. And his take is noted among the other historical Perushim. Ma imech, he says, imcha, Yisrael, ma ho ilach, what good did it do you? Shebein Arayos says, Zecharim Ravtza, you lay down with male lions. You were a tough girl, what good did it do you? He says, lay laid mehen Arayos kamosan. He says, to give birth to other lions, to sire. Well, sire is the male, but to give birth to other lions like them. Maho il Yehuda, la'amid li'olam melech ben melech. Listen to this. What good was it for Yehuda to have king after king from his line? Maho ilah. What good did it do her? Shebetoch kfirim gedolim, that among larger lion cubs, Rivsa Gureha, her young lion whelps were Hakatanim Lamalchus, too young to be kings. Shubasof Batal, in the end, Batal, she caused to ascend, says Ha'alas the Gidla Echad Migureha. She took one of the youngest lions and she put him up as king. Kolkach shekfir haya, that he was a kfir, meaning the next level. Gur is a kfir. That means it's a young lion, no longer a baby lion. V'kasher haya chazak kolkach she'adam achal oz nitfas b'sachtam. He says he got so big and strong that he became a devourer of men. And what did they do? He says they caught him in a deep trap.
Was David the
So-
youngest of his brothers?
Again,
Was David the youngest of his brothers?
yes, David was that. Yes, thank you. You asked me a question I know. David was the youngest of his brothers. Yes.
So
And you were asking for a reason.
simile is there.
Because you're saying the youngest one, but guess what? Who coronated David?
Well,
Shmuel coronated David. It wasn't his father or his mother who put him up to it. And how did the Navi choose him? With Nevuah, chosen from God. So this seems to tell us that these are the progeny of David. This is David's line. Had a method of choosing people, which maybe, says Rabbi Eliezer, was not Kedai. Let me see if I missed any Mefarshim along the way. I'm sure I did.
then
So,
again, Shlomo was one of David's youngest.
Shlomo was one of David's youngest. Yeah, he wasn't the oldest. You're right about that. I think he was in the middle. Anybody know? Was Shlomo in the middle of the line of the sons of David?
He wasn't the youngest.
Yeah,
He certainly
were
wasn't
in
the
agreement
oldest.
about that. So, if you'll note, here we have the word imach, or imcha. He says among the lion metaphor, and in Pasuk Yud, if you turn to Pasuk Yud, we have the term, it says imcha kagefen. Your mother is like a vine. Your mother is like a lion lady, and here your mother's like a vine. So the word aim is used in both places. Now, if we look at Pasuk K, remember we're going through this to get the storyline. Batera ki nochala of da tikvasa. And what does that Pasuk mean? It means that, you've got to turn pages, you pardon me. She saw herself disillusioned. Lost was her hope. Meaning, the first son was captured. So what did she do? She took another one of her cubs. Into a young lion she did make him. He says, "Patach achad migureha kefir smashu." She says, "Samashu." Said, what was he? He was a gur. He was a baby lion, but she made him into a kfir. Does that mean it was premature? He wasn't ready for the throne. She was pushing him forward. Could be. Rabbi Eliezer says about this that he says, Samashu, Kafir Samasu, Melech. He made him into a king who Yehoiakim, the Yehoiachin. This is not one of the kings. This is two. They say Yehoiakim and Yehoiachin were coronated at the same time. The Tzidkiyahu Bechlal, and Tzidkiyahu was among them. Shekulam Naflu Biyad Melech Bavel. They all were dealt with, defeated by the king of Bavel. Yehoiachin and Tzidkiyahu Galu Bavel. Yehoiachin and Tzidkiyahu both went into Galus and Bavel. The Acharis Kulam Tafas, and he got them all. The derech hanikra lechlol kol malchei ha'am be'echad. He says the way of this pasuk is to generalize and lump them all together. That's pasuk A, and pasuk Vav. Vayishalech besoch arayos kfir haya. Vayilmad litrof teref adam ochal. What does that mean? Is that good or is that bad? Rabbi Eliezer says about that pasuk, "Vayishalech b'toch harayos." That means this young whippersnapper king inserted himself as his father, acting as the mother lion, put him among other kings. Kafir haya, he said, he wanted to learn how to do battle. Says Vayishalech b'toch harayos kfir haya v'yilmad l'trof teref adam achal, and the adam achal is not complimentary. It means it's not the midah that we would want to have associated with Malchus David, with a Jewish king, but that's what this lion cub learned, and the lesson was learned by being prematurely put in the wrong position. The next pasuk, Vayeda alminosav. What's an almana? What's an almana?
Widow.
A widow, right? So it makes sense. It says Vayeda alminosav. So on that pasuk, Rav Eliezer says, Hirgil lahakir Heichan heim armenos ha'adam. He learned to see where the palaces were. B'sam libo al nivtzarehem lahashchisam. He looked at the palaces where the rulers were, and he tried to find their vulnerabilities. Klomar says, Mardanim b'sarvanim hayu lahara hakol. Says those who are rebellious and those who are refusing, but that's not the only interpretation. There's a more classical way of looking at it. What's the term that says about Alman Nusa? Vayeda. Vayeda is the same as said Odom Yodas Chava in a cardinal sense. He says, Omar, says Radak, Ki haya horeg ha'anashim v'haya shochevim almanoseim. He would kill the men and rape the women. B'zeu shepirash vayeda. And that is said by Radak, and it's also said by Rashi, and Radak say the same thing. And we told you Rabbi Eliezer had to say about it. Now, vayitnu alav goyim saviv mimedinos. What is that referring to? That is referring to Rashi, Radak, Marikra, Malbim, all reference Melachim Chaf Daled Bet. And I'll read it for you in Rashi. He says, Vayidnu alav goyim saviv mimedinos, vayishlach Hashem bo es gedudei Aram, gedudei Kasdim, gedudei Moav, gedudei Bnei Ammon. It says, Vayidnu alav goyim. It means they surrounded him with the other nations who were not friendly, who were hostile. Okay. And the last pasuk in this section causes lots of problems. So, but he says, Saviv b'ndios, they surrounded him, Yifrasu alav rishtam, and they threw their nets over him, b'shachtam nitfas, he was caught by some kind of a neck brace, something that was secured by the neck. But pasuk tes, vayitnuhu basugar, now that's it. The chachim, that's the neck brace. By Yiviehu el Melech Bavel, Yiviehu bamitzudos laman lo yishma kolo od el hare Yisrael. This is a very difficult pasuk, and I'll tell you why it's difficult. It says, "Vayitnu basoger," they put him in a neck stock. Targum says it's called a kolarin. It's the band or a chain placed on a prisoner's neck. Radak says it in Sefer Sharashim. Targum says, Knesset Yisrael, Vayiviehu el Melech Bavel. If we look back to an earlier word that was said on Psukim 5 through 9, we noted problems whether Yehoiakim, who we say we're talking about, was in fact ever taken to Bavel. And he says over here that let me find it, 5 through 9. Yeah, it says, and Ibn Ezra Daniel holds that the text in Daniel offers incontrovertible evidence that Yakim was in fact exiled to Babylon in order to accommodate Yirmiah's prophecy that Yakim's body would be thrown out at the gates of Yerushalayim. Ibn Ezra suggests that in the 3rd year of his reign, he was taken to Bavel, chained in a fortress for about a year, and then returned to Israel, where he was eventually killed and his body violated. Our passage refers to this temporary exile. Radak likes this. Metzudas David says, Vayiviuhu b'mitzados, he says, based on the future tense, that they might bring him into a bimtsaros, he says, into strongholds, which implies an intention rather than an action. They brought him to the king of Bavel with the intention of having him taken to Bavel in captivity. In actual fact, however, he was never taken because he died before his sentence could be executed. Rabbi Eliezer says the passage refers only to Yehoiachin and Tzidkiyahu. Abarbanel says that the last pasuk, pasuk 8, was the last pasuk to deal with Yehoiakim, and the first part of pasuk 9, Vayitnu basugar batachim, he says, and refers to Yehoiachin, and the next phrase, Vayiviehu el Melech Bavel Tzidkiyahu. Thus, all 4 kings are mentioned in this kina. Basically, I said one of the questions is, who are we talking about? And what I've been trying to show you, not by virtue of confusing you, by virtue of the fact that I'm confused, is that there isn't a clear-cut consensus as to when it happened, did it happen, who it happened to, who are we talking to? So the who isn't really clear. But what I want to do is take you quickly through the events of Psukim Beis through Tes, parallel to Divrei Hayamim, who talks about the same thing. It says, she raised up one of her cubs. He became a great beast. It says, the people in Divrei Yamim Bez, the people of the land took Yehoiachaz, son of Yoshia. Okay. It says, he learned to hunt prey. He devoured man. It says in Melachim, he did what was displeasing to the Lord. It shows you, Vayas Ra b'Einei Hashem. That's how we dealt with all the Melachim of Yehuda. We dispatched them in a sentence like that. It says, nations heeded the call against him. He was caught in their snare. The king of Egypt deposed him in Yerushalayim, laid a fine on the land of 100 silver talents and 1 gold talent. And it says in Melachim Beis, Paro Necho imprisoned him in Riblah in the region of Hamat to keep him from reigning in Yerushalayim. And he imposed on the land the indemnity of 100 talents of silver, 1 talent of gold. Then they said they dragged him off with hooks to the land of Egypt. Paro Necho took his brother Yoachaz and brought him to Egypt. When she saw herself frustrated, the mother, who was really the father, was really the king, was taking son after son to be the ruler, her hope defeated, she took another of her cubs and set him up as a great beast. And it says over here in Divrei Yamim, the king of Egypt made his brother Eliakim king over Judah and Jerusalem and changed his name to Yehoiakim. So it says, he stalked among the lions. He was a great beast. He learned to hunt prey. And once again, Divrei Yamim says, he did what was displeasing to God. He learned. We're not supposed to learn the bad traits of the Goyim. And this is what being too young, immature, and not fit for the role is what happened. It says, but he ravaged their widows, laid waste to their cities. The land and all in it were appalled at the sound of his roaring, of his roaring. And what was the result? Melachim Beth, the Lord let loose against him the raiding bands of the Chaldeans. It says, nations from the countries round about arrayed themselves against him. They spread their net over him. He was caught in their snare. And then we said, Arameans, Moabites, Ammonites, he let them loose against Judah to destroy it, in accordance with the word that the Lord had spoken through his servants, the prophets. All this befell Judah at the command of the Lord, who banished them from his presence, and the Lord would not forgive. Then it says, with hooks he was put in a cage. They carried him off to the king of Babylon and confined him in a fortress, so that never again should his roar be heard on the hills of Israel. And it says in Divrei Yamim Bet, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon marched against him. He bound him in fetters to convey him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also brought some vessels of Beis Hashem, Beis Hamikdash, to Babylon and set them in his palace in Babylon. Where it says he learned to hunt prey, he devoured men, should be interpreted as an image from the world of the parable, symbolizing displeasing behavior committed by both kings, despite the brief duration on the reign of Yehoiachaz. You know how long he reigned for?
3 months.
3 months. It took him 3 months to be that bad. Okay, now we're going to go past this now and see what happens with the next mashal and nimshal. So if we look at Pasuk Yud, says, let me just get the exact Pasuk. It says, Imcha kagefen, b'dom necha al mayim shesula. Poria says, the anefa haisa mimayim rabim. Now, does this sound good or bad? So, Imcha kagefen means the motherland, the land, Verit Yisroel. It says, B'damecha al mayim shesula. What does that mean? Imcha ki gefen, he says, Rashi says, make no mistake about it. He says, Od ze min hakina. This is a dirge. This is not a happy time. Rabbi Eliezer says, Imcha Yisrael he Malchus Yehuda. Naasis shvala. She was brought low. Ki gefen karmecha asher shafachta. He says, Al mayim rabim hoysar shesula. He says, you were planted. We're called a gefen because Hashem planted us in Eretz Yisrael. And although we were planted in Eretz Yisrael, he says, Bimei Yehoyakim v'tzidkiel ilmole shechatu. He says, what is the other flip side of this coin? It sounds like a nice pasuk. And it is, because you know what it's talking about? The days of David and Shlomo. David and Shlomo said were the paradigm of Malchus. They were the majestic tree with the huge leaves. He said, you were in the same setting. You came from the same lineage. Had you not sinned, none of this would have happened. And then he says, Vayihiyula matos oz al shivte moshlim. Matos oz are very strong branches. Al shivte moshlim, the paradigms of trees. Vatigba komaso al bein avosim. And he said, and they grew crazy tall. Vayera b'gavho b'rov dol Yosef. And anywhere in the land, you could see these trees. Who are these trees? The trees of the royal line. In other words, they were set up for success. But what happens? Vat pasuk yud beis vatutash b'chema la'aretz hushlacha, and they were burned up in anger. He says, thrown down to the ground. In other words, how high you are, how low you fall. The Ruach HaKodim, the eastern wind, Hovish Piryah, dried and desiccated its fruit. His parku v'yaveshu matei uza esha chalasuhu. These boughs, these branches, these limbs, were supposed to be the scepter of Malchus, Yisrael, Yehuda, forever. But they were burnt from the inside out. V'ata shesula b'midbar. Where are you now? You're in the desert. Eretz Tziyavet Sama, in a land that is dry and thirsting. Vatetze eish mimate badeha pirya achla lo yaba mate oz. He says, it internally combusted. Once again, realize we're talking about the four last kings of Yehuda, from Malchus David, who were set up to succeed in the same setting that their ancestors were successful in. They were Orla Goyim, and not to mention Orla Yisrael. They internally combusted. That's what he says. He says it came from internally. Achla, lo hayaba mate oz. There was no longer the scepter of strength. Shevet, once again, means a scepter, limshol, to rule. It says, Kinahi. This is an elegy. Vatihila kina, and it became one. We're closing the book, at least for the moment, on the four last kings, how they were set up, what they were like, the relationship of them to Yehuda, was Malchus that we read the psukim in the brachos of Yaakov in Vayechi, and how it all went south. So we look at again. Who are we talking about? The Nimshol. Not very clear. What's the symbolism about? Well, the symbolism is about the lineage, the two Mishalim of vines and of lions from Yehuda. Where do these events take place? They take place outside of Yisrael, in Bavel, maybe. What Yerushalayim? Thank you. Why does this parak come now? Because we need to close the door. And why is it a kina? Because this was a powerful, powerful house that was brought down, and we have to mourn it. You have to recognize it. And what is the timeline for the Nimshalim? Varies by Mefarshim. So if we were a writer of an article, maybe we would seek to have better planned, organized information. But then again, this is not one story. This is many stories. There are many personages of which we're not really even sure. And who are we to know how Hashem told him to put this kina together? And who, other than a general dirge and Hashem's great disappointment and anger coming forth, that we can't really fully comprehend it. And I tell you, I wish I had a better handle on it. I gave it everything I had, but this is all I could come up with. So once again, if anybody wants to comment, add, I'm sorry I monopolized the mouthpiece, but my mouth is tired. I wish you all a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. We will not be meeting now or during Pesach, and we'll see what happens afterwards. And everybody should be healthy and well. Enjoy your, and say that again, Naomi? We should meet afterwards? Yes, we will meet after Pesach. I'm not sure quite when. That's why I have a wife, so she can put words in my mouth. Okay, everybody be well. Thank you again for joining me. And okay, Naomi?
That's cool.
Akasha Sameach, everybody.
Kosher and Pesach, everybody. Good job.
A good show to
Ted,
everybody.
where's Ted
We'll
Budman?
make a place of-
Where's Ted Budman?
He's here.
Ted, when am I getting latkes?
When am I getting black, as Marvin says?
Tell you what,
On Purim, what else?
it's just Seder. I'll bring you latkes.
If I live
Harry,
for-
that's not the latkes.
Oh,
It's such a memory.
no, you realize
Harry, that's
we do eat latkes at Erev Pesach.
Why
Whether
not?
you eat potato latkes or
Uh-huh.
whether you eat matzah meal pancakes.
That's right.
Yeah. Kremsel.
That's right. And you can't, and Naomi says you can't, and the answer is you're wrong, because it doesn't have the time of matzah as paskin way before me that
Well,
you
you
can
can do
eat matzah meal pancakes. Just you can't eat within the time frame with which you can't eat, period. Nothing that you can eat. I'll paskin for you, yes. Everybody, I'll
But
kosher-
not just Paskin Shilas.
on this one, I'll paskin because.
I'm joking. Brian, I'm joking.
Rabbi Farner.
You're 100% correct.
Thank you, Richard. Everybody, be well.
Everybody be well.
And a good holiday. Be well.
Have a good Yontif.
Chag
Yashka.
Sameach.
Be well, guys.